Just not used to it. Okay.
Yeah, it probably would be for you since you're used to those window managers and whatnot,
I
especially as long as
saw
you were on the
I saw
Qtile
a
and whatnot.
KBE, I saw a plasma set up with a light theme, Matt.
Okay, so Darth Vader has some kind of wicked hold over me, and where he keeps issuing color themed challenges, and I can't say no. Well, technically, it's payment for the fact that I claimed that I was going to use one color scheme for an entire year. I failed, and I begged and pleaded to be able to at least switch it up once a month. So he agreed, and that's what we've been doing. We've been switching to a new color scheme every month, which is way different because you change 4 or 5 times a day. So it's much better for me. But this time, he cajoled me into using a light theme for at least half the month. I hate it with a passion. I
Yeah.
can't stand it so bad. Okay.
I'm just curious. I mean, because you've done the tiling managers for a little while. Because I find like when I go back to Windows, it just takes me so much more effort again using the mouse and just
Oh my God.
wasting time. I'm just curious, have you like done any of your own shortcuts
Well, I
to try to
have
speed things up?
I have a few. I obviously have ones for workspaces. I've also reset the ones for moving the windows into certain quadrants and
Okay,
to
good.
minimize and maximize, and that's worked okay. I don't remember them all the time.
Yeah,
Really,
you'll get it
the
though.
my biggest issue is that once I move to something like Plasma, I forget that workspaces exist. So, like I talked about this on my Patreon only podcast the other day, but the when I'm on a window manager, I put everything in its proper place. So, like on Workspace 1, that's the browser. Workspace 2 is always Todoist. Workspace 8 is always Crusader. Workspace 9 is always Discord.
Right.
Always that way, never any different. And if something is different, it freaks me the hell out. On something like Plasma, it's just a pile of windows. And while I have 6 workspaces enabled, I never use them. Like I'm not using any right now, and I have tons of windows open. Now I do use activities, which I found very interesting because that just kind of, for whatever reason, that has kind of stuck in my brain as useful, whereas the workspaces on Plasma haven't. I think, I think the reason why on a desktop environment they don't work for me is because when you change from one workspace to another, all the monitors change, and that bugs me because if I want to
Yeah.
have Todoist and my browser open at the same time, that's fine. But if I wanted to have Todoist and whatever open, I'd have to switch everything over. It's just not, or pin Vivaldi to all the workspaces, which would then defeat the purpose of having different workspaces. So I don't know. It's just not has not been for me. But I claim to myself that I'm going to use Plasma for 2 months, mostly because I'm begging and pleading with Vaxtree to make Hyprland stable. Just please make Hyprland stable. I want to use Hyprland so bad. It's so good, but it's also so incredibly buggy every time he releases a new update. Like every time. Just drives me
It's so
nuts.
funny that you have such a different experience than I do.
It's stable for
Hyperland's so
you?
great.
I'm sure it's hardware related to some degree.
Uh, That see, that's the problem that I have. Is I go in there and I ask for help in their issues on GitHub, and this is an NVIDIA problem. Well, the problem is I haven't touched an NVIDIA card in 15 years,
Yeah.
so it can't be an NVIDIA
You're no
problem.
longer infected, you mean? Yeah.
You've always had sleep issues with that system.
You know what? I fixed it though, dude. I know exactly what the sleep issues are. This isn't.
Really?
It was the external hard drive that was attached. Now the computer behind me has the sleep issues. This one here no longer does. It works perfectly fine. Now I do have some issues with this monitor not wanting to turn on when it comes back from sleep, but all I have to do is hit the escape key once and it turns on. So,
It comes on.
yeah.
Yeah, see, I had a different issue, and I was experiencing a very similar problem to what you were doing on my laptop that I travel with. And I was like, what the crap is going on? And I fought it and I fought it. Apparently, there's a bug in the HP BIOS in that computer that Wake on LAN also applies to the wireless card. And the Realtek wireless card was such a piece of crap. I replaced it with the AX200, but it was such a piece of crap that it would turn off, but Wake on LAN was stuck on. And so whether you had the system plugged in or not, and sometimes it'd do it, and sometimes it won't, it would just reinitiate Awake on LAN and turn the system back on.
I think that's what
And
my
even do it if you
Mac
close
does
the lid.
sometimes. Is it turns itself on.
Yeah. Yeah, even just closing the lid, sometimes it would just still be on because, oh, you said wake on LAN all the time. I'm just going to always be awake.
Yeah. No, I mean, I powered down the Mac, an old Mac Pro, and I'd come back like the next morning and it's powered on. I'm like, what the?
I thought for sure, Matt, when you did a video 10 days, 2 weeks ago, something about when it was time to reinstall your operating system or something like that. I thought for sure you would have like wiped the whole thing and started over again.
The reason why I made that video is because I was thinking about it. I was having some issues at that point where every time I started the computer up after a reboot, things just froze. Like every once in a while, just the whole system would freeze and it wouldn't come back ever. Like there was no way to get to TTY, nothing. And I'd have to actually get up behind my monitors where my computer's at and do a hard reset. But after an OpenSUSE update, that stopped. Now I still have a problem with Vivaldi freezing, but that's a Vivaldi problem for what. Okay, so there's a very staunch difference, very stark difference, I should say, not the right words, very stark difference between reporting a bug to a proprietary piece of software than a open source one, and it was very apparent to me when I reported the bug to Vivaldi, because I reported it to them, and basically they just emailed like, oh, we couldn't make this bug happen again. And that's it. The issue's closed. Like there was no discussion, nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, don't you want to know anything more? Maybe so I could give you some more details." And they're like, "Nope, it's closed.
No.
Whatever." Like, come on, man. Like, it's just a shame that
I have
Vivaldi's
seen
so
that
good.
with developers many years, for many years.
Yeah,
Works for me.
Yeah, works for me is exactly what that email basically said. So anyways, once that was fixed, I decided I was just going to try to keep it going. So I'm going to try to get to the year point of OpenSUSE before I do a reinstall. And even then, if it's still working as well as it is right now, I'm going to try to carry on, because that was the whole point of the challenge, was to try to use the same install for the entire 2 years. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'll be okay with one reinstall. I've basically said I'm okay with that, but I'm going to try to save it until I absolutely have to have it. So.
Yeah, I can respect that.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I don't have to.
It makes it difficult though to report bugs, because I think I reported something from the Genie text editor. I reported a bug, and I also reported some. Well, it wasn't really a report, but basically I had a feature enhancement that I was curious about, and so they treated both the same way. Completely ignore both. You know?
Wow.
It happens, man.
One way to do it.
That's my favorite. It works in the lab, right?
Well, yeah, that works for me, or we can't reproduce it, so it's not a problem. I was like, okay.
I mean, I understand that because everyone has different hardware, they're running a different operating system, they're running a different distro, they're running on a different desktop environment. It's really hard because you don't know what's causing what. I mean, for all we know, it could be Wayland, it could be Pipewire, it could be whatever. And if you don't have a team dedicated with that type of hardware running that exact setup, finding that thing and reproducing it is probably impossible. But some I mean, asking for log, I mean, because they don't have.
That's what I was just about to say.
They don't have a place on their bug report form for logs. They have one for screenshots, but not for logs. So I figured, like, if they email me back, that they'll ask for something. Maybe they'll ask me to run it in the terminal to see what the terminal's spitting out, whatever. Nope, nothing, just closed. And it was very, I mean, even the most ridiculous open source developer always, I mean, that's the first thing they'll do. If you don't attach the logs, they're freaking out. Like, where are the logs? Give me the logs, man. At least some kind of log here. You got to have a log. None from these guys. Not anything about.
Have you ever
logs.
been on the Garuda forum?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. If you ever report any kind of issue or you have a question and you don't post their diagnostics, they yell at you.
No.
Yeah.
Yikes.
They literally, they'll post their, this much. Even when you submit it, it says you've got to run the INXI thing that they use, and it dumps out your setup. Now, granted, they solve a lot of problems, but yeah, no, that's kind of triage 101. I'm surprised they didn't want like like I say, you were talking about running it to TTY or system D log or something.
Literally
You
anything.
even make an effort, just to make a valid effort.
Well,
I'm not
especially
asking necessarily to reproduce it.
Yeah.
Go buy my hardware, but the logs can tell you a lot.
well, at least it'll tell you something. It's better than no logs at all. But and the weird thing is like it's even worse because afterwards I was able to get more information because what's happened is when I upload a video to YouTube, if the whole browser just completely freezes. I can't go to another tab. I can't scroll or anything. But the keyboard stays active. So if I tab through stuff, like I can click links, I can go to different text boxes, whatever. The keyboard works. The mouse doesn't. What ended up what I found out was that if I that only happens when I drag something into Vivaldi and have it upload that way. If I upload it via a file picker, it doesn't happen. But I didn't realize that until after I filed the bug. So it was already closed by that point. So I either file another bug, in which case I'll probably get the exact same response, which is a waste of my time, or I just live with it and upload everything via the file picker. All right, so technically we have a topic for tonight. We haven't actually got there yet, but that's fine. I think we have switching to Linux. What is the hardest part? So what we'll do, by the way, welcome to everybody who's watching live. Hello. Hopefully the audio is working because we don't have anybody in the chat yet. Hopefully everything's working. Because I'm assuming if everything wasn't working well, somebody would say something. Although I've had people just not say anything at all. You're just sitting there talking and nobody can hear you, but you don't know because it's on the other end. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into the topic. If you guys want, we were doing pretty good without the hand raising. So as long as we stay pretty good without the hand raising, we continue on without it. But if it gets too bad, we'll just use the hand raise feature again. Let's go around. I'm just going to go with the people who are unmuted for now. If you want to chime in, you'll have to, go on. But D-Dub, seeing how you're the first person who's unmuted, what do you think the hardest thing about, or when you switched to Linux, what was the hardest thing for you? Granted, it's been a while though, right? I'm assuming.
Decades.
I knew you were one of those old timers. There wasn't a comment on the age. And then you froze.
I started with a very, very, I don't remember the release, a very early version of Debian that was hand built for an industrial application on storage, actually. It's kind of an interesting story, so I'll tell you sometime. But boy, for me, it wasn't a huge jump because at that time that was before Windows. So I was using, CP/M, early DOS. I was very used to the CLI, so it became more about learning, these new commands, learning this new shell, because that was even before I got into Solaris, or at that time SunOS, before Solaris. So basically the commands and knowing where things were, and understanding, like I say, an entirely different paradigm from CP/M and DOS, as you can imagine.
I can get that. Also, I remember when I was in school, and we had our computer teacher guy had us do this. I don't even remember what language it was, but basically it was like the first purely color monitors that were in the school. I'm sure they existed before then because my school didn't update for ages. But he taught us how to code this stuff. It was like you coded each pixel and it allowed you to do kind of like very basic animations. It was very fun. But it was all done through the terminal. And I remember that, and that was like, I was in kindergarten at the time or something like that. Probably first or second grade still, but I vaguely remember all that stuff, and because it was even before like you remember those Apple like mice that were like square and had like the square button? That was before that.
God, that's the Macintosh. I think it had those. Or yeah. What did the Apple IIc have?
Yeah, one of my friends had a Mac like that.
I think it had the square button.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember. It's been so long. I used to service Apple IIe's.
I'd actually like to have an old Apple like as a monument to the times past.
I was gonna say it's a bookend, a doorstop.
Well, who was it? Somebody I was talking to, maybe on one of the lugs, actually has. Maybe it was Steve. I don't know. It was somebody who had like an old color with the old color iMacs, like the ones with the the cubes or whatever. And those are always really cool. Like I always wanted one of those too. But it's like wanting a CRT monitor or a tube TV again. Like where are you gonna put it? All right, Drew, you want to tell us about your the hardest thing you did when you switched to Linux?
I don't know if it was hardest, but basically I thought there was just information overload because I'm coming from Windows and genuinely hating it. And knowing that there is this entire like universe out there of Linux and different distros and different desktop environments and I'm like looking at it like, what's the best one to go with? And so it was kind of like a paralysis by analysis. I didn't know exactly. So that's when you go into that like distro hopping stage where you genuinely have like, three different distros in 1 hour. You're just like, oh, that sucks, and then go into the next one and everything. But it was basically the hardest thing was trying to find something that jibed with you a little bit, rather than, and the fact of the matter is, you can, at this stage, you get to what you are comfortable with, and you just stick with it. But well, I mean, not always. I mean, Debian basically for me. But when you're talking about like, watching YouTubers like Mad and DT, it's like, oh, Arch has got to be the best. It's got to be, because all these guys are running Arch at this, and so let me try that. Oh, this sucks. I can't do it. So anyway, I just think it's just kind of information overload was the hardest thing to kind of get over, to finding where you belong, like a distro home, basically,
Yeah, I think that was probably for me too, is finding the distro they want. But let me, just something you said there remind me of something. So the hardest part about, so first off, I never grew up wanting to be a YouTuber. So it's really weird being at all influential online. Like I've had a Twitter account since like 2006. And back then, teenage Matt, I'm trying to think, was I a teenager in 2006? I don't even remember. The young Matt version wanted nothing more than to be popular on social media. Now that I am popular on social media, I want nothing more than to go back to not being popular. Yeah, like I can't imagine. It's really weird having. I mean, let's just narrow it down to the Linux stuff. It's really weird having influence over anybody's decision on what distro they should use. The number of people who have tried OpenSUSE since I've started using OpenSUSE is like at least a dozen people. It's crazy. Like, first off, use what I mean. Don't. I'm just a dude on. I am no different than anybody else, and I think most people realize that. But for whatever reason, they think that they see me using it, like, oh, that must be something that I should try to use. And I was exactly the same way with DT. I was like, oh, he uses Arco, I'm gonna try Arco. Because he has such a good time with Arco, so that I was influenced the exact same way. But it feels weird now being in that position where people pay attention to the things that I use and think, well, I should use that too. Like, no one should have that type of responsibility placed on them. Like, and this is just, I can't imagine what Mr. Beast feels like. It's really weird. All right. Anybody else want to share their hardest thing? I have a whole bunch of people muted here, so I don't want to call anybody who's not interested in sharing.
I will definitely share.
All right, so raise your hand because I don't know who was talking.
It's less fun, but mobile.
All right, go ahead.
I am fairly new to the Linux community. I, really dove headfirst into it in about November of last year. But the biggest thing, outside of just going nose deep into Arch, which, good God, I should have never done. Because it both made me wish I had learned literally anything else, but at the same time, I was like, cool, now I really understand like a little bit more about Linux. But the main point is NVIDIA. Holy shit, NVIDIA. It's so bad, just all around. I continue because I still haven't bought a AMD GPU yet, but NVIDIA has definitely been my biggest pain point since I have started my Linux journey.
I think that's way a lot for a lot of people. I mean, we have a whole Linus GIF of him flipping off Nvidia for a reason. You get so I haven't touched Nvidia in 15 years or so. Those of you who have Nvidia, has it gotten better? Like, I hear that it got better, but I don't know for sure. Anybody know?
It has definitely gotten better, but it still isn't great.
Yeah,
It
it's by
also
far
tends
the
to
worst.
break. You know, you're good at rev blah, and then they update and it breaks things.
I think it really has to do with what your actual card is too. If it's an older card, an older NVIDIA card, I think you're going to get better support as opposed to the latest and greatest. As far as I'm concerned, I never had a problem with with a older NVIDIA card on Debian as long as you install, the right driver, which is
The
seemingly
Nuvo drivers have gotten a lot better for the
yeah.
older hardware.
Since
Yeah,
A
but
lot better. I've got a hybrid laptop, and it's the only thing that Arco has been the only thing that runs smoothly with that.
Okay.
All right, Goosh, go ahead. I'm gonna call you Goosh forever and ever. So we're gonna have to live with that.
So I got to do something real quick. Can you
Sure. Zypux. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mispronounce everybody's name. I'll just call you Z. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can call me Zipix. It's fun.
Zipix. That's it.
So my biggest,
There
yeah, yeah. So my problem whenever I first switched to Linux was, can I get applications running that I was getting on Windows to run? And my biggest one was FL Studio because I dabble in music sometimes, and I had originally tried LMMS, and I thought that LMMS was it's kind of decent, but it's missing a lot of features that I use in FL Studio, and it just wasn't working. And then whenever I switched to Linux, I found out about Wine. I started experimenting a little bit with it, and finally I got FL Studio to work, and it was like everything that I want to work can now work, and it was a good feeling because I really like Linux for what it is, and I didn't want to leave because I love the customization aspect of it. So
music production is one of those things where a lot of people hit their wall. Like, they just either, especially because there a lot of people. I mean, I'm not a musician like at all. I was in band, but that was 30 years ago. But a lot of people have a lot of, like, they have their own DAW that if they can't use the DAW that they like, they're not going to be able to do what they want to do, and a lot of that stuff just can't work here. Dennis, go ahead. You're next.
So the hardest thing for me so far has been choosing applications that I want to begin using. In the past, the applications I've had on Linux have been older applications, so choosing new applications is harder.
Yeah, it makes sense. War Thunder, you're next.
Yeah, I was just going to lean on. Sometimes it's just hardware compatibility. Like, I'll admit, when I first learned about Linux, I didn't know that you needed to install drivers, to be honest. Because I was always told that, oh, everything just automatically works, and that's obviously not the case. It is more so these days than it used to be. But I had silly things like I didn't know about Nuvo. I just thought the laptop I had at the time, I didn't even know it had an NVIDIA card. So I've learned a lot since then. But I found a lot of edge cases that always gave me trouble, and I understand them now more than I did then. Like, even though a Wi-Fi card works, it may not work correctly. I had a lot of issues, especially Qualcomm, where it sort of works. And so you're like, oh, my Wi-Fi works great. Then you install Linux and find out, no, it turns itself on and off a lot. It has these other issues or whatnot. And then you have to, yeah, I see that cough, cough, Broadcom. I burn every Broadcom card I have. I'm not even joking. Like that. I used to install the drivers, and whenever I had all these issues, I'd brick the kernel. I'd have all these problems, and like, oh my god. And you know what's funny? I used to complain a lot about NVIDIA, and I still do because their proprietary driver sucks. But it is better, and I have a laptop over here. Somehow I have managed to install the proprietary drivers on that Quadro card, which Zany and them will know as whenever I had playing Minecraft and Intel UHD graphics problems and like, oh my god. But and you know what's funny? It has a lot about I still do because they're proprietary support, so I can turn it on and off and whatnot, and it works. And I have a laptop over here. Somehow I have managed to install the proprietary drivers on that.
I think I'm muting the wrong person. War Thunder, I think I muted you on purpose. Zombie, you have some background noise, so I was trying to mute you. Hold on a second. Sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. I guess it... No, you muted yourself. It wasn't me.
Okay. It was fun.
Yeah, sorry. But
No,
before you go back, Felipe C and Zombie, you guys had background music. That's why I muted you. If you want to talk, raise your hand. I'm trying to keep the audio clean. So War Thunder, I apologize. Go ahead and finish what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I was only going to say I got the proprietary driver installed in this thing, and I've used Linux Mint before, obviously many times, especially because it and Pop! OS do a great job with repackaging those NVIDIA drivers to work really well, especially through updates. I had systems that were years old that I never had a single black screen of death or anything like that. I had some sleep issues, but that's just the NVIDIA driver. I have hybrid graphics and sleep working on this laptop running Linux Mint Debian Edition with hybrid support. If you'd asked me 2 years ago if I would have done that, I would have called you crazy. Just because I don't think the drivers had gotten to a point where I could just say install NVIDIA driver and then install CUDA, and then boom, hybrid support already kind of works. I can pull up Kden Live, I can do editing. All that works just a lot better than it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Goose, you're next.
All right, cool, man. Hey, sorry about before. I apologize. Had to take care of something. Hey, yeah, no. So I grew up on Windows. My first box was a PNY machine with a turbo button on it. So I had Windows 3.1, right? So for me, my first real dip into Linux was, I guess, it was Solaris 8, right? And I was doing it for work, and so I was introduced to the concept of a file system that was not graphical. And that's a huge paradigm shift, right? When you're looking at text on a screen that's supposed to represent what a file is, what a folder is, and there's no real indication unless you do the correct command for showing like, oh, it actually is a directory with file permissions and things like that. So like that is, I think, in my opinion, the single most hardest point for shifting between Linux or sorry, from Windows or whatever you're coming from to Linux.
Yeah, I agree with that. Nerd, I'm not gonna say it. Nerdgasm Cody, you're next. Thank you.
All right. I'll try not to take too long. I've had a couple different starts throughout the years. I'm 30 years old. I had Windows crash pretty hard back in like 2009, I want to say. And my brother was the one who would always help me at that time. He wasn't around. I didn't have my own internet. And I was volunteering with a local fan convention in Idaho at the time called Fandemonium. And so someone gave me a Linux CD. My brother wasn't available to help me get Windows reinstalled. I didn't have any disks or anything at the time. So I took that. I went and I installed, I believe it was Ubuntu at the time. And it was really interesting. Just everything was a little bit different. I had a lot of fun with it, but I definitely had problems because there was a number of things that wouldn't work, and I didn't know how to do any of that at the time. I thought it was pretty interesting at the time, though, that I had two drives that were working together as one, but it didn't actually detect both of them, and I could get some of the files, but not all of them. I was a crash and burn back then, but I poked back in to Linux every once in a while over the years. And there was a few times in the early 2010s when I tried to use it as my main thing, but every single time I would just run into something breaking, some error, some big problem of various type. And through a lot of Googling and stuff, I just couldn't figure out a lot of the different stuff, or things just were not quite specific enough for what I was using or what I was doing. And just really was not quite smart enough to get down and figure it all out. But probably about 6 years ago or so, I got back into it and actually found that, hey, this is stable for me now. Things are actually just working now. But over the years, I tried dozens and dozens of different distros. I would just play around with installing 20 different distros on a crappy laptop just to see what the different ones were like just every single day, like 20 different ones. So I touched hundreds of distros at one point. But when I actually settled down on it, I'm on Manjaro, and I've been really happy with it. I've tried a few different other things since, but I've gone back to Manjaro. I was one of the people complaining about some of the problems with God, I'm forgetting words today. My brain is not working really well today. But yeah, it was a lot of problems with drivers, or just weird things that I could not find when Googling. That was the main problems for so long, but not for the last 5 or 6 years. Most things I can figure out at now, both because I'm smarter, also because things just work better. They're just in general. So yeah, okay, that's all.
That's good. Zombie, you're next. Oh, you unraised your hand. Do you not want to go? Somebody's in trouble.
My ride's here. I gotta go.
Zombie, you're gonna have to unmute yourself if you want to talk. You can go ahead. Yeah, still can't hear you. Let me make sure that I don't have you muted. So you're yeah. Nope. Nope. Still can't hear you. Audio problems on Linux? That doesn't happen ever.
Ever.
Like not a chance. Like
No, never.
All right. Well, we're waiting for Zombie to get his audio fixed. Restart the Pipewire server, Zombie. For me, audio was one of the things that I had the biggest problem when I started the YouTube channel. But I didn't really have problems with it before. It's just like the more complicated your audio setup gets, the worse audio gets on Linux. But if all you ever do is listen to music, it's fine. I think when I first tried Linux with SUSE in 2002-ish, 2001, 2002, somewhere around then. And I was able to switch it over on my gateway computer fairly decently. The problem was that there was no games, and I wanted games, and Windows had all the games. So I went back to XP almost. Actually, at that point, it was probably 98 still, to be honest with you. I don't think XP was out. But, there was certain games and stuff that I needed to do, and also Word and, stuff. Because at that point, yeah, Windows had, or Linux had, they had like an Office suite at that point that you could use. It was probably Open Office at that point, I'm guessing. But it wasn't really well suited for working with Office files. And if you wanted to use anything for school, you had to have Office files. Like it was if it wasn't DOC, it was nothing. So I wasn't able to stick to it. And then 2017, when I switched over, then I don't think I stayed on a distro long enough to have problems. I hopped. Like sometimes I hopped 3 or 4 times a day, because I wanted to try stuff. Because I was a bleeding moron when I switched to Linux in 2017. Because I thought, and I swear that this thought lasted for longer than it definitely should have, was that if in order to try a different desktop environment, I had to do a reinstall. I couldn't install it on the distro that I was using. I had to go either use another flavor of the distro that I was on, or I had to switch to a different distro. And often it was switching to a different distro. So if I wanted to go to KDE from GNOME or whatever, or Mate or Budgie was most of the time I had to switch distros. So that's the reason why I switched so often in those early days. I did eventually slow down and understand and learn, but it took longer than it should have. Zombie, did you get yourself fixed?
I think that I have. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Okay,
now.
it was not actually Pipewire. It was actually Firefox. I switched to changing. I changed from Firefox to Chromium, and now everything's fine. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to tell a little bit different of a story than most people are used to here. I've been in the Linux environment since about 2001. That long. I started on Mandrake 7.1 back when that was a thing. And believe it or not, one of the reasons why I switched from, at the time, Windows 95 and 98 to Linux was because certain network devices on my, again, Pentium 200 would work under Linux that wouldn't work under Windows. In particular, I had a computer that had a BIOS limitation of hard drives, a BIOS hard drive capacity limitation of 8.4 gigabytes, and I stuck a 20 gigabyte hard drive on it, or in there. And as long as the 1.2 gigabyte drive that the machine actually originally came with was still in there, it could boot off Linux, and then Linux could detect the 25 gigabyte or the 20 gigabyte drive, even though Windows wouldn't detect it. And I started on Mandrake 7.1 running KDE, and certain network services that I wanted to run on my little home lab network. Hang on. Is that from time and eternity ago? Why do everyone seems to be smiling at me? Anyway, I have been through at least almost 25 years of this. And I mean, I have struggled through unbelievable things. Like, what on earth was that?
Someone's getting arrested.
Did anybody else
Your
hear
time's
that?
up.
Yeah, we all heard it. Don't worry.
Okay. Why do these things always happen to me?
It wasn't just you. It was either we're being trolled or someone literally lives at the fire department.
So like I said, 25 years of this, I've had to, I was sort of in competition with my college because in my college was in the process of adopting Microsoft Active Directory services as part of their coursework. And I had to basically go out of my way to learn all sorts of arcane concepts about OpenLDAP and Kerberos and Samba in order to get Linux to interoperate with Microsoft Active Directory at the time. It was years of work. And the thing is that all of that work would be moot now because we have Samba 4. But back then, none of that existed. So the biggest barriers for me with Linux were applications or environments that either jobs or schools require you to run to be able to pass your coursework or to be able to do your job if we're talking about an employer. Again, I've done a lot in workplace environments. I've had to support heterogeneous setups, and I can tell you that, again, I'm not diminishing anybody else's struggles with with things like hardware incompatibilities. Those things happen, but it's a whole new level of fear when you're faced with I have to do this, have this software to complete this class or this assignment or I'm going to fail this class, or I have to have this software to do this facet of my job, or um, I'm going to get fired. That's what and that's an even bigger barrier to some people than simply the hardware incompatibility issue.
Well, I mean, in order to get to that point, you have to have your hardware to work before you can even get to the software problems that Linux has had for people. So if you can't get your Wi-Fi to work, Linux, it doesn't matter how many applications Linux has. So that's the way I look
That's
at that.
absolutely true. And I've been faced with Wi-Fi issues on Linux before. And I mean, I've had struggles with it. If I've had it. Oh, someone else would like to speak. I will yield the floor and reserve the balance of my time.
We're not in Congress. If we were, we'd be fist fighting. Dennis, go ahead.
Just use a laptop for school and work, and use a separate laptop for home.
I'm assuming that was in response to something Zombie said.
Yes.
Let me respond to that just real quick, Zombie. Not everybody has more than one laptop. I know, guys. As Linux nerds, everybody who has a camera, raise your hand. You have more than one computer, of course.
Oh my gosh!
I should admit how many I have.
And if you,
my wife will rat me out if I say anything.
There's probably a pile of ThinkPads behind every one of us. I'm just
ThinkPad, Mac Pros, Asus.
The over/under for this group is 5.
Do we count stable or fully functional devices? That would be a lot less for me.
I'm in a 12. I'm in a 12 by 12 room. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 computers in sight. 2 of them are running. So yeah, Felipe.
I have like 9 within arm's reach of me.
Yeah.
Wait, 10.
Where's 10?
There's one on the floor over here.
Okay, 10. There's another one on the floor over there.
Hear the wife chiming in. Oh, you got more than that.
Oh, I've probably got like 30, but like I only use like four devices most of the time.
2 of mine in your arm's reach.
That's also true.
Felipe, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so you want to hear the story how I got into Linux? That's what we are doing.
The hardest thing about switching to Linux is the topic. What was the hardest thing?
I think for me, it was around 2000, and I didn't have any like good internet speed. So what I had to do is basically download diskettes and things like that. So what I did was actually I used Fat Linux, that distribution that you can install in Windows. So I used Linux inside Windows around the year 2000, and that's how I got uh, used to Linux. And then I decided like, yeah, I want this installed properly, and then uh, I downloaded the software through very slow internet connection. This is in Mexico, by the way. And I went to straight from Fat Linux to Linux from scratch. So I built everything, step by step. And then I used that for a long time.
I was gonna say, are you still on Linux from scratch?
No. I went from Linux from scratch, then Fedora. I used Fedora for a long time, but that was way later when the internet speed was better. And then I got disillusioned by the Fedora community, and then I switched to Arch Linux. But that was way later. So it's like I stay in a distribution like very, very long time.
You're not a distro hopper.
No, not at all. I have tried different distributions, but for example, I tried Ubuntu, and for me, Ubuntu was not Linux. So I just stayed with Fedora.
It had
So I
to.
was
I'm sorry. It had to been pretty. It would have been pretty shocking to go from Linux from scratch to Ubuntu. It's just like can't think of two
yeah,
things that are more
So
different.
yeah. So I mean, the thing that I remember because it was so long time ago is that in Linux from scratch you had to set up the get TTY, every single one you configure. So when you use Ubuntu, they don't even have those. It's like only one. When you do Control F1 and then you switch to the console, I think Ubuntu doesn't even have that. You have to uh, configure it, something like that. So for me, it was like, this is not even Linux. Where are my consoles? Like real console, not the X one. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
When you do Control F1 and you switch to the console.
Well, Ubuntu has TTYs. I'm not.
Yeah. But I think it's not. They are not. At least at the time, they were not configured by default.
Mm. They are now, but I think Ubuntu runs their when they were on X, they ran their X session on a different TTY than other distros did. But I'm not sure if that's true. Drew, you have something to say?
sorry, I was like looking in the NFL draft for a second.
I hate you a little bit right now.
So what's funny to me and very interesting is there are so many different stories, and there's just seems it's a very, very personal experience for seemingly everybody. You know, it's like when I don't know that we are as in particular, this group is a very it's a special group, let's put it that way, in that we are a lot more technical in our abilities than most people. So when it comes right down to it, you see um basically what we're looking for is ways to overcome other people's objections in order to get where we think we should be or they should be, because I can't tell you how many times I've tried to, like, you know, hey, talk to my wife and say, I think you should try this. And then there's an objection. And then there's another objection. And you know what? There's no leg to stand on. If you want to use Outlook, I cannot do that for you, you know? Or if you're talking to my son and he's like, you know, and especially my son, like 6 or 8 years ago, and he's like, can you get Roblox to work on that? Because if you can't do that, then I don't want this thing at all. And I'm like, no, actually, no, I can't get that to work for you. So it's an interesting scenario for everybody that, you know, that makes it to this point.
Yeah, I totally agree. The interesting thing is, like, I have that exact experience. Like, my dad doesn't care. Like, as long as the machine doesn't reboot during a reinstall of updates, or preferably doesn't do an update at all. So I just have the Ubuntu LTS on there and he never updates it. And that's fine. You know, it works perfectly fine. He doesn't care. All he uses is Chrome, so it doesn't affect him. My mom, on the other hand, does other things, and she does a lot of stuff with images and stuff online, which means she's always messing around with a file picker. And her prime complaint when I tried to switch her to Linux was that the file picker was terrible. And everybody wonders why I always talk so much about file managers and file pickers. Some of that is because it's apparently genetic. So searching in a file picker is almost impossible. Like, you can't, like the GTK one doesn't support it at all, or at least it didn't until Portals came around. The Plasma one has it in some weird, interesting way that you have to kind of know the secret handshake in order to actually get a hold of, and then it doesn't work very well. So, and she that's how she finds all of her files, because she's the least organized person that I know, and they're all shoved in one directory. I mean, if I hadn't yelled at her to not put things on the desktop, she'd be the person that put everything on the desktop. Instead, she just puts it all in a folder, which is basically the same thing. But that's how she finds everything. She knows the names of it, so she goes finds it and stuff. So that's the reason why I can't. She's the only person in my family that I do tech support for that still uses Windows. I just can't get her to switch to Linux because of that one complaint. I'm sure if I solved that complaint, there'd be another complaint somewhere along the line, and that would prevent her from
And
using
give her
Linux.
Ubuntu. That'll solve it all.
There you go. But I think that also you are like the objections for Linux are getting smaller and smaller and smaller too. So
Yeah, it definitely way smaller than they used to be. At least now, for the most part, Wi-Fi does work. I mean, for the most part, audio does work. And we had much bigger problems 10 years ago. Felipe, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very true what you said, that this is like maybe not the average Linux user. I mean, I'm certainly not average at all. But what I try to do is I try to like do the most minimal thing, like just XFCE, minimal configuration, stuff like that. And it's because of that that I have very little issues. I just use Xorg with XFCE, terminal, it's very simple stuff. But for example, recently I tried KDE because, well, I have a disdain for GNOME that you will not believe. So XFCE
We're kindred
has worked for
spirits.
XFCE. Oh, I have written so many blog posts about this. But for more than 10 years, I have been using XFCE with no problems. But then I tried KDE, and I joined the Discord server or Matrix, I don't know what it is. And then they immediately said like pushing for Wayland, like you should use Wayland. And then I realized, wait, actually I'm using Wayland, and it's crashing, and that was the problem. I switched to KDE with Xorg, and it works perfectly fine. So what I'm saying is that like if you're an expert, then like don't use this, don't do that. But if you're a newcomer, then like what is Wayland, what is Xorg, like why does one crash and the other doesn't? What is a display server? What is a Windows manager? Like for me, I don't have any issues with Linux. But for a newcomer that doesn't know any of this stuff, that might be tricky.
Yeah. Lexi, go ahead. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Good.
Okay, cool. So I feel like I'm the perfect follow-up for that because I've been 4 months on Linux, and my biggest challenge has been just finding like scientifically backed information, like how things work fundamentally, rather than people just throwing their opinions of I use this and you should use this because I use this, even though I don't fit any of the same use cases as you. So what I run into anytime I'm trying to learn how something works, because I want to be a power user coming from 30 years of Windows and trying to learn how something works, and someone just points you at, here's like a video that's super fluffed up on how to do one very specific thing in one very specific way that shows you nothing about how it works. And when you have an issue, I'm just going to say, I don't know, install a different distro. It is so hard to find good information, and that is clearly the biggest barrier in everything.
Yeah, we should all go back to Windows because that's true. The problem is that we all have the things that we like. We all have our different knowledge that we like to share. And when I think everyone who makes content online, in some case, whether it's just posting something in a forum or making a YouTube video or whatever, they're going to want to putting their opinions forth, and is just kind of the way that's going to happen. But because there's 12 different ways of doing something on Linux, always, like, it doesn't matter what thing you're doing, what problem you're experiencing, there's 12 ways of fixing it. Everyone has their favorite way of fixing it, and everyone's going to share that favorite way of fixing it, and they're also going to look down on you if you fix it some other way. Unfortunately, I don't think that one of the topics that we voted on for for this particular LUG is the Linux community toxic, and unfortunately, I mean, I think there's some toxicity there in this specific, way of it. But everyone just having their own way of doing something, I don't think is toxic. It's just the way that it is and the nature of the way Linux is, because there is so many different ways of doing stuff. The problem, of course, is when people get pushy about their particular way of doing something, and that happens all the time. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, there's certainly some areas that are toxic, but I also think there's a lot more areas that are very elitist, where they're, what we were just talking about with, my distro is the best, or, you're doing it wrong. I mean, there's some of that in Nix. I mean, there's the Nix way of doing things, but there's also the easy way under Nix of doing things. But you potentially you can get looked down if you do it that way. So absolutely, and again, everybody's got their preferences, opinions, and I think there's a lot of very banter that goes on that's can be easily interpreted, incorrectly, because people make fun of Gen 2, or they make fun of OpenSUSE, or they make fun of NixOS, and I think there's a little bit of a excuse me, a bro battle, a measuring going on, shall we say?
Well, everyone says Linux is a cult, but it's not really a cult. It's a collection of cults that we're all members of in some ways. And even if we don't want to admit to the things that we like being, and saying a cult maybe is a little bit hard, but it's a tribe. We're all members of this group. And when you said someone was making fun of OpenSUSE, D-Dubs, I got mad about it, even though you were using a hypothetical. I wanted to show my sticker off, yeah, and everybody knows that. Yeah, I know you did that just to troll me, you ass. The thing is, like, everyone, I mean, we've talked about this in the podcast. I've made videos about it before. Every Linux YouTuber ever has made a comment about, the fragmentation and the tribalism and the cultism and all this stuff that goes on in the Linux community. But the problem is that no one ever says, this is how you fix it. And unfortunately, that's because there is no solution to it, I don't think, other than everyone using the exact same thing called Windows. Like, it doesn't happen on Windows because everyone's just using Windows. It's the exact same thing. You can't have, you can be a Windows fanboy, but you're not, there's not like Windows Arch Edition fanboy and Windows OpenSUSE Edition fanboy. It's just not, those things don't really exist. Felipe, looks like you're next.
Can you hear me? I think something happened. The volume is okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's more than elitism. I mean, certainly there is some elitism, but I think it's arrogance. In many communities, I like say I have a trouble. I go to the IRC chat, I ask a question, and they immediately assume that I'm the most newbie person in existence. Nobody assumes that I may know what I'm doing, and what I want is a good use case. So I think it's a problem of lack of humility, that nobody ever assumes that maybe you know what you're doing, and maybe what you want is a valid use case. They just say, like, just use Wayland. Why are you using Xorg? Like, because Xorg has been working perfectly for me for 15 years. Like, and somebody mentioned that a newcomer has trouble with this, like 20 different variables. That's why I say, like, okay, try to stick with just one distribution, just try to XOR, try different drivers maybe. But if you try to do distribution hopping, and then Wayland and XOR, and then KDE and GNOME, there's a multiplication of variables, and then it's really hard to narrow down what the problem that you have might be. It may be just a driver, but it might be a driver in Wayland, not the driver in Xorg, or maybe something with GNOME, or that doesn't happen with KDE, or something like that. So it's this multiplication of variables gets really overwhelming.
What you need to do, Felipe, is just paint on your forehead, I used LFS for years. I know what I'm doing. West Fun, go ahead.
This is just kind of to piggyback off of the fragmentation talks and all the elitism and toxicity, because I really believe that toxicity and elitism go hand in hand. Because there is no way you are an elitist of something without being inherently toxic about it. And I've been blowing up the text chat about this. But the RTFM guys, we all know that's kind of what Arch was known for a while. That's at least what I associate it with. And my rebuttal to that, at least with the Arch forums, is I'll read the forums when the forums are awful to read, because it is such a gargled mess on there. Oh my god.
Well, the Arch forums are their own, beast when it comes to toxicity, and everybody knows it. Like, even the Arch guys would freely admit that their forums have problems and lack moderation in some. I think if you talk to the guys that are most frequent over there, they know it. I know the OpenSUSE guys have talked about this too in their own forums, is that they have had problems in the past with moderation and stuff like that. When it comes to so my Discord server is a little over 2,000 people. I have some really good mods that I think they're all really great, and I trust all my mods, but I could have 500 mods, and it's just an almost impossible task to wrangle any number of people. There's like, what, 15 people here on this chat here, and I have a hard time by myself just being a moderator, and everyone here is perfectly well behaved. We don't have trolls and like that coming in, and thank goodness for that. But I think moderating is hard. Also, people find when they are hiding behind a username, that anonymity gives them oftentimes or they think it gives them the right to lose all of their manners, because there's no consequence there for, you don't know who I am, you don't know my real name, I can say whatever the hell I want. And that's not a Linux problem. That's a internet problem. And Elon Musk would say that the best way to solve that is just make everybody verified. You show your identity, show your driver's license if you want to have an account on Twitter. Obviously not going to work, but I don't think that there's a good way around that problem, because that's just a general internet problem. It does seem to, it feels, I think because a lot of us are really entrenched in the Linux community, that it feels like it's worse here than it is elsewhere, because we spend a lot of our time here. But it's not. This is a problem everywhere, and I think that there are definitely certain communities that get a bad rap for being worse than others. Arch is one of them. Gentoo a lot of the times is one of them. Even though I've never heard a bad word from a Gentoo person, I've heard stories though from a lot of other people who have interacted with Gentoo guys and have had problems with them. I've heard problems about OpenSUSE. I've experienced some of those problems with OpenSUSE. I've had problems with some of the OBS guys who are very, very interested in seeing your logs when something goes wrong. And if you don't give you their logs, you're not going to get help. And they're very, with a project that big, even with not even just a project that big, every project, when you're going to get help for something, if you don't do things in the way that they want it done, that's just a form problem in general. But when you're trying to get help and you don't follow the way they want, they're going to get salty because they're very constrained on time. So that's the developer's problem. But regular people, like, often don't have that excuse, and I don't know. It's a problem. Go ahead. If you wanted to go ahead.
No, I was just kind of bouncing off that. The whole RTFM thing wasn't to bash like the forum mods or anything, because trust me, that is an unbelievable task, and there's a reason why it isn't done. Not to their fault of their own. A lot of them are unpaid. I think the most frustrating part is the vocal minority of things. Because we all know that that's not what the majority of the Arch community is like, and same with Gentoo or Manjaro or OpenSUSE. But I don't think it takes away from the frustration of a new and entering user, because they are normally the first ones on the scene.
Mm-hmm. assholes ruin it for everybody, and usually the only ones you hear from are the assholes. Felipe, go ahead. You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. What you say is very true. That it's very difficult. I was a moderator of a big sub in Reddit, and yeah, it's really difficult because on one hand you want to foster discussion, but on the other hand you don't want things to get out of control. And one example of the opposite of what you said is, for example, the GNOME forums, where they don't allow any criticism, anything that you say, you're permanently banned. And then I think that achieves the opposite. That is that now nobody can say anything, and then there's this lack of openness, and then things stagnate. And to find a balance between chaos and everybody just being afraid of getting banned, that's really tricky.
Well, the solution here is actually fairly simple now that I think about it. Just make everybody pay. Like if you want support, you have to pay for it, and you want to know. I know that's very gatekeepery and never going to happen, and not even a solution that I would support. But people tend to act differently when they have to put money on the line, or they have to put something on the line to have the account, to have the right to speak. If that happens, they are more likely to behave because they don't want to lose that and then lose their investment. D-Dubs, go ahead.
No, you're right. I think when something is given to you, often it lacks perceived value. So I've seen it on the forums where people are like, well, your support's terrible, I'm not going to buy your product. Well, first of all, you're not on the official Discord server for the product, and did you buy it? No. But yeah, that's a big issue. I don't see a problem, for example, having an expedited tier for pay. If you're on a serious project, and and that's important for your business or
Proxmox
whatever,
does that, yeah.
Then yeah, there's nothing wrong with a pay level tier that gives you priority support.
Yeah, I think that it's not hard. So like something for like Proxmox or even like GNOME or KDE, you could do something like that, but the smaller projects would have a harder time, especially smaller projects that have alternate ways of doing things. I can't really think of a good example, but I'm sure there's plenty out there. Just if it's a smaller, if you can do something without paying for it, you're going to go that way, even if the benefits of paying for something is better. But it's just when the idea, it's just a problem with general free things in general, right? You put it exactly right. Perceived value. When something is free, you think that you have the absolute right to use it because it is free. We had when Audacity was bought by the company that bought them, I forgot their name. Everyone was freaking out because they're going to make all these changes and stuff like that, and they've been able to use it for free for a very long time. And like, oh my God, they're going to put a paywall in front of it or do something really weird like that, and people were freaking out about it. But I think that as you use something free for long enough, you feel like you've become entitled to. You continue to use that thing for free, and well, it's not really the discussion here, but it comes along with support too, because all that stuff, that entitlement of using it also gets translated into how you treat others who use something different. It's very, it's all human nature-y. we need to be a psychiatrist or something, or a psychologist or whatever. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up, I also mean, of course, larger projects, like OBS, which you need for your business, for your for your YouTube channel and everything else. So those kinds of very essential, extremely popular ones, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with paying for it if I'm using it every day. I think it should, but that's it's not realistic.
Well, no, I mean, every Linux YouTuber has made a video about money and supporting projects. All those videos do horrible because no, I mean, that's just the nature of it. People want the free stuff, and it doesn't appeal to people to want to pay, and most people can't, fork over lots of money. But plus everything, there's so many. Like, how do you choose? There's different platforms. Not everyone has an ability to have a credit card or a debit card online. They don't have a PayPal account or whatever. So, if there was one central way to pay, I mean, that was the ideal thing behind Patreon before they did, the Patreon crap. Felipe, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think one important thing is to remember what fundamentally what we are doing here is open source software, right? So the software is supposed to be free, and then there's some conflict between open source developers and then open source users, and then who owes what to whom. uh, because a lot of times people complain that as a user you are not entitled to anything. The developer can choose and decide whatever they want to do because they are offering the software for free. But what is the objective here? And when it's proprietary software is very clear, but when it's open source software, it's not so clear. Like, what is the objective? What are we trying to do here?
Show someone knows in the chat says I never got pride for installing something, and that's something that a lot of people don't like. If you install Linux from scratch, you're going to have some pride over doing it. If you install Gentoo, you're going to have some pride over doing it. The problem is, like, when it devolves down there, a little lower, and you get into the Arch. Like, Arch at one point was quote unquote hard to install. It's not anymore, but the more, when it was more difficult, people had pride over installing it. That's just something that was true because it was something that they felt like they could do and other people couldn't do. Weird psychology there aside, it definitely did happen with a lot of people. That's the reason why I use Arch, by the way, exists, is because they were proud of installing it in the first place, and the maintenance that goes along with it. And there's nothing wrong with being proud of using Linux in whatever form you use it, and it's just when you take that pride and rub it all over someone else is when it gets gross, in many ways. So yeah, I think that when it comes, I mean, we really have transitioned to the other topic, which is fine. I think that when it comes to overall toxicity in the Linux community, that the loudest people tend to be the most toxic, and unfortunately, but also it's not that everyone isn't also elite in some way. Like, we all have the things that we enjoy, and we tend to tell, because of the nature of the beast, we all kind of tend to tell people what we enjoy using and stuff like that. It's just, people tend to get pushy. It's when that pride and that passion for whatever you've installed goes too far and starts to be pushing on other people that it becomes a problem. And unfortunately, it becomes a problem quite often. And I was listening to, before we started this, I was going on my walk, and I was listening to the last Late Night Linux podcast, and they were talking about the most recent Windows thing where they're going to start putting more ads in the Windows Start menu, and how some people will respond to people who are complaining about that, who use Windows. The Linux guys came and said, "Well, you should just use Linux." And I made a whole video literally saying that, I think. But some people just can't use Linux, and a lot of times us Linux as a more broad community do tend to get pushy with the Windows guys who can't use Linux for whatever reason, and we get very pushy when like, why don't you just use Linux? Why don't you use Linux? Why don't you use Linux? Listen, Linux is awesome. It's really easy to install. Hell, I'll install it for you. Why don't you just use Linux? Like, some people can't, and I think that we have a hard time realizing sometimes they can't. And it's the same thing when people find a distro that they really like and they're on it and they're using it, and then you encounter someone who uses a different distro that works really well for them, and they're like, why don't you use this distro? It works better, it has better X support, whatever. Why don't you use this and this and this? And then it just becomes, well, I use this, it works for me better than what yours is working for you, therefore mine is obviously better, and it devolves, and it's not a great situation, right? But I don't think that, again, the solution's just not really there. Drew, go ahead. Thank you for saving me from rambling on for the next 10 minutes.
I was just about to say, though, that it's weird because, as I said before, I don't think that we have typical users in this group. And the thing that I keep going back to is, if you're really talking about a typical user, they can use Chrome OS. I mean, seriously, they can use Linux. Their entire interaction with the internet can be done in a browser. So do they need to be on Windows? No. Do they need to, they can be on anything. As long as it's got a browser, they're like good, And I think that that's true for just a majority of internet users. I mean, most of them are using their phone. I can't use my phone for shit, but put me in front of a PC and I can use it, But I think I'm in the minority when it comes to people being able to use their phone for their own needs, And I just think it's one of those things where we're not typical. That's just the truth. That we're not typical when it comes to being a user. The typical people are like my sister who thinks she can only use Windows, but the truth of the matter, she can use anything. She just needs a browser.
Well, that's where most people are going to end up going, right? Is Chrome OS. I think it is something like Chrome OS, and Linux really needs something kind of like that, where it's just kind of like very browser based. I know that Ubuntu Web was there for a little while, but it never really took off. Dennis, I think you were first. Go ahead.
I can use just about, at least understand how to use just about any operating system nowadays, thanks to playing around with window managers way back when I was first starting to use Linux. But I don't think I'm typical either, that I understand how to use a bunch of things.
Felipe?
Yeah, I was just wondering how many people here are developers, because that's the other side of the coin. Yeah, the vast majority of people are just users, but everything is about development. Like, remember how things were like 10 years ago or 20 years ago? There was no Chrome, there was no a lot of things that now we take for granted. They have been slowly getting better. And I remember every year is this year the year of the Linux desktop. That's the only thing that is kind of Linux has not conquered, because let's remember that Linux is a kernel. Android phones use Linux. So the only thing that the Linux ecosystem is missing is the desktop. And how we get there, well, that depends on the developers. Like, who is actually going to write the Linux desktop that is going to conquer everything? Not developers, KDE developers. It's not going to be the users. The users are just providing feedback. But how can we like together push towards that end goal? It seems like some communication may be missing.
Mm-hmm. Dragon, go ahead. Can't hear you, Dragon. Audio problems on Linux, am I right? I think you're right, Felipe, is that the developer perspective here is probably missing. Developers tend to avoid large groups because they get ganged up on. But Dragon, go ahead. Nope, still can't hear you. Nope. You want to check your source in the Jitsi thing. You hover over the thing and the little arrow there on the microphone should give you sources. You can also check your PACTL app if you.
How's that?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. It's my first time using the microphone, and I've never spoken on the Jitsi thing yet. I was going to talk about how you covered the toxicity, and that might be a turnoff to people, because that's what I ran into back in 2001, 2002, when I first started using Linux. Was first exposed to Linux, it was Red Hat. I was a Windows admin at the time. I literally built a server, or a learning center, and I needed a server, and the guy that was taking over my job installed Red Hat as the server, and I had no idea how to use it. And I asked him to show me real quick. Hey, how do I do this and how do that? He was, I'll just take care of it later, instead of showing me what to do. And that's the type of thing that I think is scaring people away from Linux as well, is they're afraid that the Linux people have such a bad reputation from that many years ago that they're just going to be like, oh, well, don't worry about it. They're not getting the support they would at Windows. Windows, everyone knows how to use. At least, you could ask anybody, hey, how do you do this in Windows? And 9 people will give you 9 different ways to do it, but you still can do it. Where with Linux, it's a lot of times it's the person doesn't want to share how to do it because they're afraid that they're going to lose that prestige over you, or that step over you they have of knowing how to do it. That's my experience with it anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And there's another thing is that when the hoarding of knowledge, but also the disinterest in having, noobs around because they're going to dilute the awesomeness that is Linux. That happens a lot. And another thing is another thing that you said there is exactly right. Even if we were to fix all this and everyone become awesome, we're all perfect little angels now and don't have any elitism or toxicity whatsoever. The stereotypes are there and they're going to be there for probably ever, unfortunately. Linux is for nerds. You guys, everyone's seen that stupid freaking YouTube video. This is how a Linux user installs a browser. That's the stereotype. Unfortunately, it's just one of the many that exist. Zipix. I've already forgotten how to pronounce your name, man. Z. Go ahead, man. I'm really bad at names.
Nah, you're good. Something I was just thinking about with the toxicity is that does it ever push anyone into figuring out their own problems? Because, I know for me, whenever I get I'll type in a question or something like that, and then they'll be like RTFM and stuff like that. And then I think about, well, maybe I should reword my search differently, or maybe I should look into this type of code, or maybe I should look into something. And it takes me hours to do that sometimes, but eventually I get to my own answer, and it's like I don't I guess it kind of proves something to me that I didn't need them to begin with, but I think it builds people sometimes with the toxicity. I think it can be a building block sometimes.
Sometimes I think that a lot of times it goes the other direction, where if people encounter it, they just head back to Windows or whatever they were using, or not fix the problem or whatever. But sometimes you're probably right that it would spur them on to actually read the effing manual. Also, I know we say the RTFM a lot, and it usually applies to the Arch Wiki, and I think one of the reasons why they're so confident in saying that is because the Arch Wiki is so good, but also as we go along, the Arch Wiki is no longer as good as it once was, and I say that just because crap ages. like it just, some of that stuff on the Arch Wiki is no longer applicable anymore, and while they do a good job of sometimes keeping it up, it's not always the case. Felipe, go ahead.
Just very ageist, Matt.
I know. I called D-Dubs old earlier, and I felt bad the whole time. I wasn't really actually calling him old. I just knew he'd been using Linux for a long time.
It's okay. I am old. It's all right.
I'm also old. I'm 40, almost 40 years old. I'll be 40 next year, so that's old enough for me.
I got 20 plus on you, pal.
I'll get some gray in my beard eventually. Just give me some time. Felipe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a developer, so when I stumble with a problem, I usually don't listen to the suggestions I get. I always just go straight to the code, figure it out myself. It's like I think like maybe less than 1% of the time I find the solution in a forum or somewhere. And if you do that, takes a long time. But if you do that, you realize that most of the
Seriously? That was pretty rude, man. Okay, Felipe, just know that I did not kick you. Some douchebag did. If I don't know how to add him back, unfortunately. Someone's gonna have to teach me how to become the only admin here, because that's perfectly rude to do that.
Yeah, big time.
I don't know why they would do that. That was fucking rude. All right, I'll figure that out before we do the next one, for sure. I don't know if Felipe's on the Discord or not. So he wants to try to message him. I don't know what their username is if they're on there. Anyways, on that kind of spoiled the mood for me, guys. Anybody have another story that they want to share about hard things on Linux? We can kind of move away from the toxicity. I mean, as we just kind of saw toxicity. Mickey Biss, go ahead. I'm sure butchered your name.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that what I've noticed for every new user is that you won't find this. I don't know if this was talked about yet, but you can't find certain apps on Linux, like the people who use Adobe software, the people that use like Windows applications on Linux. Yes, there is alternatives, but there isn't. But people won't switch to something if they don't have their applications, which I think people should give Linux a fair shot if they want to. But we can't promise that we can get Adobe applications on Linux.
Yeah, the Adobe thing's always going to be a big issue and it's never going to happen, I don't think. Although, I think I read somewhere that they're trying to get like Photoshop and some of the Adobe stuff working in like the browser itself. So maybe that'll be the solution. Dragon, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, based on what he was saying, part of it is maybe they can't switch over.
You went muted there, Dragon.
I must have clicked the mouse twice. They might not be able to switch to Linux from Windows because they have to use Excel, for example, at work. And
no, you did it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, maybe. All right.
Hands off the mouse.
Yes. I think actually my mouse is just hovering over the microphone and it might have just been clicking on its own. But yeah, they might have to use Office, for example, and they can't use the alternatives because.
Did it again, Dragon.
Someone's just muting them.
Someone's doing that? Whoever's doing that, stop that bullshit.
I was going to say, it sounds like somebody's muting him.
You remember what I said earlier where we're all perfectly behaved? Yeah.
Everyone but
that
person.
as a challenge.
Unfortunately, it doesn't tell me who's doing it. Otherwise, I'd boot the fucker.
Anyway, yeah, they might have to like for example, I used to have to use Office because we had to use Excel for everything we were doing, and I couldn't use the alternatives. It just wasn't allowed, and that could be a part of the reason why people aren't switching over to Linux. That's part of the reason why it's so hard to get people to want to switch because, like, well, I have to use it at work, so I might as well use it at home. That type of thing.
All right. Hopefully the person I just kicked in was actually the person who was doing this, because they turned my video off, and that's not okay.
What the hell, man?
All right, Mikipis, go ahead.
So I think for one of the things I've been thinking about is that when people watch, say, you, for example, and or DistroTube or any other of the Linux YouTubers, they see the window manager and they want to figure out how to do it, depending on which one, whether it's Qtile, whether it's i3. Where do you think people should start with if they want to do something with window managers? Like say if they had some experience in i3 and they want to move over to, say, Qtile, what do you think is the best landing point? Where should they start?
Well, if they want to move to Qtile, the easiest thing that they can do is find some, and I think that this is the best advice for any window manager. If you want to switch to one of the window managers, find someone else who has done it, steal their configuration file, and learn it from there. That's how every single window manager that I've ever tried, I've started off with someone else's with someone else's configuration file and started from there. That's how I learned Xorg, or not Xorg, but Xmonad. It's how I learned DWM. It's how I learned Hyprland, all of them. Mikipis, go ahead.
Can I steal your dot files?
GitLab.com/the LinuxCast. Yes, you can. They're all up there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, they're right there. Drew, go ahead. Yeah, you're muted.
As far as window managers are concerned, like if you want to go Qtile, I wouldn't recommend using it on Debian. Not at all. But if you're interested in something else, then that makes sense. But for whatever reason, Qtile and Debian are, you can get it to work. It's just a pain in the butt with Python. It just is.
That's what I was going to say. It's Python. To build a Python.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Python.
Yeah, because the way Qtile wants you to install it is with pip, and unfortunately everything in pip nowadays almost certainly has to be done in a Python environment. Felipe, someone else kicked you. It wasn't me. I just want to let you know we're having some problems with trolls. So apologies for you getting kicked. That was not on purpose.
Okay.
Don't know why they did it, other than to be assholes. So apologies for that. But anyways, yeah, if you want to get started with Qtile on Debian, watch Drew's channel. He's like the only guy I know who's actually got it to run well. Now, they did some tweaking in the last version where it does work better in pipx, but it's still a little funky. So Z, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I tried installing Qtile on Debian because it was something that I loved using whenever I was on Arch Linux, and I couldn't for the life of me get it because of it was always some warning that I was getting where I had to make an environment for it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna scrap that idea, and I went to Awesome instead.
See, the best solution would be, if it worked well, would be to just install it in DistroBox. Unfortunately, in order to get DistroBox working with a window manager, you have to do a lot of stuff to get systemd and dbus up and running, and it's not user friendly. You might as well just distro hop. Drew, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up by just saying I did a video on Qtile. I would not recommend that video, except I did learn quite a bit from Linux Dabbler several months ago when he did a Qtile installation. And basically what I did was I stole his idea and then created a script to automate the installation of Qtile on Debian. It's, and that's pretty darn good, because basically it sets up the virtual environment necessary for Qtile to be installed. I didn't want it to be about my Qtile or whatever, but I'm just letting you know that if you watch that one video of mine that I did a Qtile installation on, I hated it. I probably should take it down.
All right, somebody keeps joining and kicking new people, so I'm just kicking everybody who joins. That's my new solution. If you really want to join, tough luck. We're almost done anyways. Next time I'm finding out how to be the admin. There has to be a way. I haven't seen it yet, but there has to be a way. Nerdgasm, go ahead.
Yeah, so on window managers, I'll say that I've been flirting with going to window managers on and off for a while now. I used to play with a lot of ones just for weak computers for a lot of time years ago. Now, like the tiling ones, like really got me interested. But something I've had a problem with on and off, playing with like i3 and stuff, is I'm a Dvorak user, and sometimes the buttons that they say to push are follow what the actual letter is, and sometimes it's the placement of where that letter was on QWERTY, and that gets a little confusing. It makes it a little hard to remember, even if the distro, like, say, has a guide as their default wallpaper or something like that. It's like, yeah, some of these buttons totally work exactly as they should for me, but nope, some of them I have to press where that key would have actually been on QWERTY. So that's always a little bit fun.
Unfortunately, the Vim keys are always the hardest for me when I want to switch to a different keyboard layout. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, just on the Qtile, if someone really likes it, I got a personal opinion is the Arco Qtile is pretty much dead on the best. You know, especially you can add Derek Taylor's config on top of that, and it all just works, which is kind of nice. So, just something to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I think that applies to basically all the window managers. If you don't want to go find a specific YouTubers, you know, first off, I'm kicking you for saying NixOS is better than OpenSUSE. But the problem is that so if you don't want to go through and find a specific user's configuration files on anything, go to Arcos, because they have everything there, and you can just start there from all of them. It's just the best place to start in a lot of cases. But also, you can also head over to my .dot files. I have all of them too, and have customized a lot of them. But mine are all funky, very funky sometimes, because I like to source things out. Mikipis, go ahead.
Would you have you ever thought about doing a video on Qtile where you run through a process of like a basic setup?
I have one. Unfortunately, it was 4 hours long, so I sped everything up 1,000 times and put it on YouTube. It's there. You're just gonna have to slow it down a lot if you want to actually see what I did. And there was no sound, so technically I did do that. Maybe I'll put, because I still have the file somewhere, but literally it was 4 hours long, and I couldn't get it down less than like an hour and a half. I tried. Mikipis, go ahead.
What distro are you using? I'm just curious.
You talking about me?
No, I'm talking about Mikipis. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm using I actually have a dual boot of Arco and Debian, Zorin, which is a little weird for me. But if anything, Matt, I'd watch the whole 4-hour video. But that's just me personally.
I may find some way to post it. Several people have asked me to post that, because I did post the time lapse of it online or on the channel, but I didn't think that would do very good at that long. Posting anything over an hour. Xaniath keeps fighting with that guy who joined. Stop trolling people with your name, and then he'll stop kicking you. Probably. Anyways, but yeah, that's Qtile. Has anyone, Drew, have you tried Qtile again, but with the Wayland version anytime recently, or have you not tried Qtile recently?
Oh, I don't do anything on Wayland. Sorry, dude. I'm not doing anything over there.
I saw you with Hyprland for like half a minute.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yes, I did a video on Debian testing, because that's the only way you're going to get Hyprland to work. and it was very version specific of Hyprland. It was version 35 compared to, I don't even know where they are right now. But 35 worked because of what Debian packages are in the testing repo right now. Beyond that, I can't verify, because as soon as Hyprland changes something, it's not Debian, it's not in the Debian packages anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like they upgraded something and you can't even get to work. So I had one person on my channel that said, hey, I can get 36 to work. I said, well, I'm running a script that is running this whole thing, installing everything off of one script on Debian testing, and it works. So I'm not changing a thing off of that version, off of Hyprland's version 35.
Well, okay, so everyone knows that I've been having a lot of problems with Hyprland. One of the biggest problems with using Hyprland on a distro that isn't like rolling is that it pins itself to a specific version of WL roots, and if you don't have that specific version, then you're going to have problems. What I really desperately want Vaxry to do is create an LTS version. Like, just for the love of God, create an LTS version that's going to work for the next year, and do it once a year. It doesn't have to be every 2 years. It doesn't have to be about support. Just, it has to be not updated for a while, you know. And it would be perfect for Debian and even OpenSUSE, which tends to run a little bit behind on some of the packages that Hyprland needs. D-Dub, just go ahead.
No, I agree, and I know the script that Drew used, and that's, I've even tried to update it, and it's a mess, unfortunately. And with Vaxry, I don't know if everybody noticed, but he's created a whole hyper world of, you know, Hyperlock and Hyperpaper and, you know, Hypercursor and all this other stuff. My hope is that .40 will be more towards what you are describing, and it's on release, which are going to be yeah, it's 9.1 is where we're at right now, and it's broken a lot of some of the daily builds have broken things. Again, you know.
So the most recent problem I had is that it crashes OBS for whatever reason, and it's not, can't be a Wayland problem because it's working fine in Wayland right now, and it has for a little while. But for whatever reason in Hyprland it crashes always at the end of the video, always. Like that Windows video that I made not too long ago crashed at the end of the video right after I got done praising how awesome Wayland was. It was the stupidest thing ever. Hyprland, right? If I were to say what window manager I wanted to use right now and have it be my window manager, Hyprland would be it. Like, I like everything about it. And it's not just about how flashy it is either. It does a lot of things really well. When you can get the developers to not tell you that it's an NVIDIA problem, they're almost always very interested in finding out the problems and providing the solutions. Again, when you can get them past the NVIDIA thing, because I don't use NVIDIA, it can't be an NVIDIA problem. But workspaces work the way that I want it to work, but there's an option to have them not work the way you want them to work. If you want them to have more of a manual pin to monitor type field, that's by default. You can also have them work like Exponent. It has basically everything I want, but it's just it's not stable. McKeepus, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to want to hear it, but I mean, the only way I've gotten what I consider a stable Hyprland is using NixOS, because you can basically, you know, freeze it for. I know you're laughing at me. I know.
Just a little bit.
I did not know that was coming. That's
no, and it's not. And again, I'm not saying this about NixOS is the best thing.
You know,
I'm just saying that the only way that because I'm agreeing with you 100% that the instability of Hyprland is a serious issue, and it is because of the personalities of the people that are developing it. Isn't going to be better anytime soon. But I'm saying, for me, if someone says I really want Hyprland and I really want it stable, I say you got to look at something like NixOS. It's up to date enough that you can run the current builds that work well, but you don't have to be like in a rolling release. And then if I don't update my Arco, I'm going to have problems before long because I didn't update.
Right.
So that's, again, I'm not, because I know you're not going to do NixOS, and that wasn't like an advertisement for NixOS. I'm just saying for anybody who says, well, I really want Hyprland. Well, that's one of the reasons I went to NixOS.
What would be do you think that the situation would be the same if you just use the package manager? Like if you're on like Debian and you try to install Hyprland with the Nix package manager, would you be able to accomplish basically the same thing without, the configuration file? Do you think?
I think it would take some work. I think it's certainly possible. The nice thing about it is if it didn't work, it's easy to get rid of the Nix packages and you leave the Debian hierarchy and structure pristine. So you're not going to break Debian by putting on this. I don't know. I think
maybe
I'm honestly just kind of waiting till Debian catches up a little bit farther, and quite frankly, for Hyprland to get a little more stable. Like something like if finally no more new features.
Even if Baxter said it, though, I wouldn't believe him.
Well, think about it. What's really left. I mean, there's the wallpaper, the lock, the plugin manager,
hypercursor. I know that
right, the hypercursors, which is actually a good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the stuff he does isn't bad. Most of the stuff I think is good, and I understand because in terms of compositors, Wayland is a effing mess. There's a reason why Sway does it one way, Hyprland does it another way, River does it another way, DWL does it another way. They all do something different. Yes, they mostly use WL roots, but because they have to solve all their problems, they're all solving it in a different way, and that's what Factory is doing. He's making it work well for Hyprland, and that's great. But it also causes all these problems. And I know that his eventual solution is plugins. When he wants to add a new feature, it's going to be a plugin. Then he doesn't have to mess around with the base overlying system. But it's not there yet, unfortunately. And also, they're going to do the same thing with everything else, is that there's 4 different plugin managers at the moment, maybe even more than that. And they're all going to do something slightly different, and they're not going to be interoperable. It's going to be a mess. Felipe, go ahead.
Am I the only one that doesn't use a tiling manager, just straight off XFWM?
No, I use KDE.
I'm also on
I
KDE
mostly
at the
use
moment.
Cinnamon or KDE.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
I love KDE. Yeah.
I wouldn't go so far as to love it, but it's on my machine.
Well, hey, that comes with caveats, man.
Yeah. Arch is a special case.
Surprisingly, Plasma 6 has been the most stable version of Plasma for me. And it's weird because normally I'm the one with Plasma problems and everyone else has the stable thing. Now I'm the one with the stable and everyone's having problems. Makipis, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I've had pretty good experience with 6. My issue is getting it to where you want. Their app store and their whole, pulling down your themes and all that is so buggy. But once you get it set up, it's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Makipis, go ahead.
All right. I have 2 questions. Do you think that we'll ever get sound sharing with screen share on Discord?
No.
And then
it's an Electron problem. Is the whole thing that's going on there? Electron, in order for Discord to support it, Electron's going to have to support it, and Electron's not very well supported.
Sorry, but there's a build of Electron that supposedly does support it. They
Does
just
it?
haven't incorporated it. Yeah, I want to say like 27 or something. I don't remember the exact number. That's what I've been hearing.
That's complete new. Well, now that I think about it, if you use WebCord has a newer version of Electron. Right. I don't think that it supports what you're talking about, Makipis, but it does support a lot more. It cooperates with Wayland and Portals a lot more than the standard Discord does. So maybe there is hope there, but I know for a long time. A lot of the problems that Discord has with Wayland specifically is because of Electron. They had some really weird interactions with Portal for a long time, but maybe they're fixing that. I'm not a developer, so I don't know. You had another question?
Yeah. for those who are really, really not into Linux, but they really want to get into it, and then once they have more experience and they want to get into window managers, would you make a video on how to use people's dot files, like say yours and or DTs or?
I've thought about it, but the problem is that we all do dot files differently, and incorporating them isn't always the same. I could probably do like a series where they're all like from window manager to window manager, but so DT doesn't do anybody a service. Like, I love DT. He's a great guy. He's done a lot of stuff for the Linux community in terms of providing a lot of content for people to learn from, especially when it comes to window managers. But since he's moved to Emacs only, all of his stuff is in org mode. And that just does not help anyone, because no one in their right minds who's a noob uses Emacs. You use Emacs once you've grown a neck beard and have nothing else to do. So most of his stuff is in org mode, and it's not always not always clear how to get to regular config files. Now, he does provide them, but some of the switching and stuff is still in org mode, which is not necessarily the great, but it's a possibility for a video idea. Z, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wanting to respond to Makipis on the Discord thing. If you are okay with doing it manually, you could use QPW graph in order to share the audio through, but it's like I said, it's manual and it's through your mic. Essentially, I'd have to I've made a video on it and it's gonna come out at some point, but like I was showing where you drag the lines to like the WebRTC section of QPW graph, and it feeds that audio through there. But then you also have to go into like your Discord settings and disable some things that are enabled by default for your microphone, because it sometimes likes to cut out and stuff like that. But I thought I'd just mention that in case you didn't know about that.
That's a good idea. I forget about QPW graph all the time. I used to use it when Pipewire was terrible, but now that Pipewire, knock on wood, works well, I hardly ever use it. So we should one of these days do a whole lug on window managers. That sounds like a perfectly awesome nerd thing to nerd out about. So I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. We're running a little bit under 2 hours, which is fine, but I think it's a good place to stop here. As always, this room will stay open. Although this may be the last time we use this link, given all the crap that we just put up with. If anyone knows how to make an admin account that gives me ultimate power, let me know. D-Dubs, go ahead.
Yeah, while you were talking about it earlier, I was looking around. There's a thing called a super admin. I think you can assign yourself that, and there should be, and then no others. So I haven't found a good link that says exactly how to do it, but I would start there.
I'm assuming it probably has to be done before you start the...
Yes.
Yeah. I'll look into that, because that's obviously... if I'm going to share the link out into the general YouTube population, apparently I'm going to have ultimate cosmic powers. Archpenguin, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a thing you can enable the lobby or something.
I know that there's a way you can start people hidden. I'm not sure. Yeah.
And you approve them, and then I think you logged in with your actual email, right?
This fool didn't do shit like that. No, no, I just started one with anonymous.
That's where you've got to start. That's one of the things they were saying on the
website. Email and just
the problem was that when we first started it, I didn't know if we were going to continue using it, because I just thought maybe there was a chance we'd just go back to Discord, because I thought we'd used Jitsi before for the podcast. It was horrible. And I figured that was going to be the same case here, but it's worked perfectly fine until this one where we've had trolls. Nate, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to say hi to everybody, and I'm glad I don't have to edit this.
I'm good. Just for that, you get to edit it. It's going to stay a live stream. Don't.
Nope.
Matt, go ahead.
What up, dude? I just wanted to say, hey, I'm proud of you. Work on insecurity, though, because it's atrocious, man.
Well, it's open to everybody. Apparently, everyone's an admin. I will get that fixed for next time. Anyways, yeah, I think that's where we're
Pseudo
going.
everything.
Yeah, everyone gets pseudo access. It's just sue all the time. Makipis, go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand. We're done.
Oh, just RM, RF, everything.
Yeah, that's exactly what we should do.
That's always a good solution.
Yeah.
Apparently, we 777 to the whole server.
I did in fact, do that.
Good job, Matt.
It worked though, damn it. It worked. I went in afterwards and changed the permissions for the things that Plex did not actually have to have access to. But I was very, very frustrated with Plex because it made absolutely no sense.
I'm running with problems right now on Plex. I feel your pain.
I just use Jellyfin.
Just 7.7 everything.
I was about to say that I use Jellyfin. It just
I
even got it working for Tyler, for Zany.
As a Plex user, I say use Jellyfin.
Yeah, Zany kind of breaks everything.
Plex has a superior UI. That's the reason why I've chosen Plex.
I've been using Plex for 10 years. I haven't had any problems. So
it works
Yeah,
great.
I don't understand the issues.
Just the UI.
I can't get it to add my music correctly.
The
Like it's missing albums, all sorts of shit.
the metadata on Plex on Jellyfin is not fantastic, unfortunately. For at least it wasn't for me when I was using it. It wouldn't grab half the metadata. Things would just, even if it grabbed it once, it wouldn't remember the next time. I was probably doing something wrong. Anyways, for those of you who watched live, thank you for joining, and I appreciate it. We also apologize for the hordes of trolls that decided to roll through towards the end there. I'll get that fixed for next time. We won't have the problem because I will have the power. I'll probably nab one of my moderators to come in and help me and actually do the modding for me because I'm a lazy person. And that's what I have mods for. That's what I have minions for, to do those things. But anyways, thank you guys for watching live. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to end the live stream here, and we'll see you next time. Just a reminder, if you do want to join us.
There he goes.
There he goes again. You're muted, pal.
My question is, why use NixOS?
Anyways,
how much time you got?
Long discussion.
Thank you guys for watching. That guy's, whoever that is, stop that because that's not fucking cool. It's really not. You think you're awesome. You think that you're doing something. Oh, it's so funny. But really what you sound like is you're fucking 12 years old and you're acting more like 5. And nobody likes you. And you should definitely not be on the internet anymore. There you go. You want some elitism? There you go. And I think that's perfectly justified. Anyway,
Straight up, man.